Back to Politics Unplugged. Governor Katie Hobbs has now been in office for 100 days. So how's it going so far? Here to talk about that and the rest of this week's headlines are political consultant Cani and Daniel Scarpinato, the former chief of staff for Governor Doug Ducey. Thank you both for being here. Want to get the Democrat view on this. If you had to grade Katie Hobbs' first 100 days, what would it be?
Well, I would have to say A, right? Otherwise, I'm the right. I'm
you don't
the
have to say
on
A.
The panel.
Please.
Well, look,
it's better television if you get
the truth. The truth is that like she's dealing with a legislature that is consistently sending bills to try and like catch her, try and be message bills and these kinds of things. And she has not been looking at each bill and saying like, okay, the political consideration, I should let this veto. She's vetoing things she doesn't want. She's vetoing things that she wants to stop. And this is going to hopefully build a world where they're going to be able to get to some sort of an agreement on the budget.
Look, I'm assuming that Dan here is going to have a different opinion when it comes to the Governor Hobbs' first 100 days. You've been up in the ninth floor before. You worked with administrations. How are you looking at her performance?
Well, I would say needs improvement would maybe be a good way to put it. I think this was a pretty rocky first 100 days. I actually have been shocked at how brutal some of the media has been towards her. The Arizona Agenda called her first 100 days rudderless. So I think it's been pretty rough. And I think we know what she doesn't want. She's issued a lot of vetoes. I think the question remains, what does she want? She doesn't have a clear agenda. She hasn't laid out what are the three things she wants to do. And I think that, a lot of Republicans actually did vote for her. She's turned out to be very, very progressive in how she's looking at these bills, who she's populating her government with. And I don't really think this is what people signed up for.
And you kind of beat me to the punch because I was going to ask Tony here the follow-up question on that. Is like, should the governor be taking more of a stand on certain issues, basically picking fights for things? We just talked about Proposition 400 with Congressman Stanton just a few minutes ago. I mean, should she be taking fights like this, in making stands to get something done instead of just sitting back and vetoing?
I think that there's like a strategic, especially with Prop 400, there's a strategic plan that she's following. Her engaging out loud probably isn't going to help the legislature get to where they need to be. But I know she's working behind the scenes. I know that this is a priority for her. And so there's a lot of stuff that we aren't seeing, right? She's not out there talking about a bunch of this stuff. The Senate just went on recess for a period of days because there's not a Republican, majority anymore. And I hope that during this period, these negotiations can really start to roll and start becoming real. And I think that the pressures on the Republican side and the Democratic side, it's going to start increasing. And so I'm optimistic.
And to push back a little bit on what you were saying earlier, like, people want to know what she stands for. Like, that's clear, but like...
Maybe if there was a debate, we would have known, but
there you go. Going back to the debate, to the campaign. But, like, look, she defeated Carrie Lake. The voters by a slim majority said, we don't want Carrie Lake. And isn't vetoing stuff that far-right, proposals, isn't that something?
Well, it's her prerogative. I wouldn't describe getting rid of the food tax during record inflation as right-wing. I think that's pretty mainstream, and I think that's going to be a political problem for her, along with some of these other vetoes. But I'm not talking about picking fights. I'm just saying, I mean, it's amusing to me because I've been on these shows and watched these shows for years now, and Tony and my other friends in the Democratic Party have had all these opinions about education's underfunded, this is a problem, that's a problem. Well, now you're in charge. Do something about it. Lay out an agenda and work to get it done. I don't see an agenda, and governing is really hard. And it requires talking to people. It requires going out and talking about issues. I just don't see that, and that's when I say needs improvement. I think she needs to come up with a policy agenda.
I've heard you say more than anybody that the governor does not comment on pending legislation. That was like kind of a thing that you always said when you were in the governor's office.
But he did comment on what he wanted to do.
Well, she did give a State of the State speech. Yeah. She did outline a budget proposal. It's just that the Republicans that are controlling things in the legislature, that's not what they want.
It takes two to tango. I mean, she is the governor. She's not a legislator anymore. She needs to set the tone. She needs to lay out a vision. She hasn't done that.
All right, well, let's move a little bit over to the other big story this past week we can't avoid here for this discussion. We saw the Republican-controlled legislature expel Liz Harris because of bringing a conspiracy theorist to a committee hearing and spread wild accusations out there. Does this change the debate at the legislature? We'll start with you, Dan.
I don't know if it changes the debate. I should
say the attitude, the tenor of the way the legislative session has been going.
Well, I was surprised at how quickly this moved. And what that told me is Liz Harris didn't have a lot of friends down there. I don't think there were a lot of people who were willing to stick their neck out. The reality is, I think there is some level of decorum that's expected there, and this obviously crossed the line.
I'm going to give you the final word on this.
Well, I mean, don't go after Republican leaders with your conspiracy theories and lies. I guess that's the rule. Because there have been a number of committee hearings where people have been called to testify who clearly were saying things that weren't true about the elections. And so, but the line here seems to be that she lied about it afterwards during the investigation, and then also that she, named some names on the Republican side with these lies.
All right, we're going to have to end it right there. That is all the time we have. Be sure to join us next week for more Politics Unplugged. Good night.